What's up, book nerds? My name is Tara, and today I'm going to do a review of The Secret History by Donna Tartt. This will be a spoiler-free review because I don't want to alienate the people who haven't read the book from the review, and I also don't think I have anything to say on it in general with my general thoughts that is particularly spoilery. I picked this book up for the 2016 Book Riot Read Harder Challenge. It fulfills the requirement to read a book that is over 500 pages. And I really picked it up because I started reading it last year. It's kind of been on my lifetime TBR for many years. And I started reading it and didn't finish it. So I'm using the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge as an excuse to finally power through this big brick of a book and check it off of that list for good. I picked this book up on the recommendation of a friend who said, if you like Harry Potter, you will like A Secret History. This is something she thought would be up my alley. Now, after reading it, I don't exactly understand that comparison, except that it does sort of read like a boarding school book, which Harry Potter is a boarding school book, and this takes place in college, in a small liberal arts college in a tiny town in Vermont. But other than that, there's no similarities between these two books. At least I didn't think. In fact, I would compare it more to Looking for Alaska by John Green. This would be a book that if someone read a lot of YA and they really loved Looking for Alaska, which, let me be honest, it's a lot harder these days to find someone whose favorite John Green novel is Looking for Alaska, because everyone's gone over to the Fault in Our Stars camp, and a lot of people hate Looking for Alaska. But if you liked Looking for Alaska, which takes place in a boarding school, there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of pretentious teenagers, and there's some shady activities going on, and everybody has a lot of secrets. That is very much like what this book is. They are just a few years older and not necessarily a whole lot more mature, though they do have a lot more free rein to get into a lot more trouble. So the basic premise of the novel is that our main character, whose name is Richard, it is a first-person perspective. He is from California, and he decides, or he gets in at the very last minute to a liberal arts college in Vermont. And he goes and he shows up and he doesn't know anyone there, but he quickly notices there's a group of kids that are kind of cool. They're hanging out on campus, and they're all involved in the classics department. They work very closely. It's just a few of them with one professor. They get a lot of special time, and this is their obsession. They are studying the classics, and they are also sort of living in this world that is obsessed with the classics and trying to mimic the classics, of obsession with art and beauty and experience, and just wholly removed from the day-to-day of the nitty-gritty of regular college life. They kind of look down on these other kids. And Richard eventually is given admittance into this program, and he starts studying with these kids. He becomes their friend, and he also becomes privy to their deep, dark secrets, because there's a lot of interesting social things going on with these kids. They also get involved in some very sinister things as the novel goes on. So they have a secret, which then leads to more secrets, which then leads to more secrets. So here's what you need to know about this book. This book is very pretentious. I can't sugarcoat that. That's actually the purpose of the book. So there's a big theme here of the difference between this idealized life and the real life that we all live. And it can be read as, I hate this book because it is so pretentious, but I was definitely reading it as, yes, I do believe Donna Tartt probably has a slightly pretentious little life, but she's also critiquing that, and you can't take it all too seriously because the book does not believe that this is a great way to live your life. It's not saying you need to go and absorb yourself in the classics and never watch The Bachelor because this is a higher form of art and life. I think it is very critical of that stance. So that's why it sort of reminded me of a John Green novel, because John Green novels, as you may know if you've ever read one, are very wrapped up in this pretentious teenage speak. They are speaking through the words of dead people and literary greats and kind of separating themselves from the rest of people. And I tend to think that John Green knows what he's doing a little bit when he does that, because he's feeding into teenagers' desire to feel that way. And I think that's a little bit of what Donna Tartt is trying to accomplish here as well. When you're reading this book, it does become a mystery, and he tells you right at the very beginning that a character dies, and he tells you which character dies. And I think he tells you how the character dies as well. So the cards are all shown apparently up front. It's not a mystery of who dies. It becomes a mystery of why they die and what are the events that lead up to this major event in the story. And then we can also assume then how does this affect all of the characters in the story, because we're hit at the front end with this big piece of information and then just left to kind of wander around a college campus for many, like almost several hundred pages waiting for this event to happen. And I think that's also part of the beauty of it. When you are told a big piece of information like that up front, there's a lot of tension that's built throughout the story because you're trying to look for all of those little clues that might be telling you that this is going to be when that thing happens. Even though this is a very chunky novel, it is one that reads much more like a much shorter novel. It is a very quick read. It is relatively fast-paced. There are some slow bits, especially at the beginning, if you're willing to push into some of the action of the story. But once I really got rolling with it, it went pretty quickly, and I very much enjoyed the reading experience. I also have to say that on a personal note, I loved the setting of this story. My family is from Vermont. We are Vermonters. It may not come across in my southern accent, but the setting of this story was very close. Within 30 or 45 minutes of where my father grew up. I've spent much of my life in that area of the world, and that just seeped through every page of this book. I felt the cold in the wintertime. I felt the tranquility of that type of very small New England college campus. I felt the tension between the kids in the college and the people in the community. And while this is not the type of school that I think I would have chosen to go to, I get the feeling of that little liberal arts college and the little community that's built on those types of campuses. My one complaint about this story is that female characters were not very represented in this novel. And when they were represented, they were very flat characters. For example, in the group of friends you have here, you have Richard, you have Henry, who seems to be kind of their leader, you have Francis, you have Bunny, you have Charles, and then you have Camilla. And Charles and Camilla are twins, and Camilla really is the only female character in that little crew of characters. She's also the least developed character in that crew. Eventually, I feel like she sort of becomes a sex object, and I felt that that was a very interesting choice on Donna Tartt's part. I don't feel like it was part of the overall themes and messages of the book. I just think that she didn't really want to write a complex female character here. She was focusing on these men and what they were doing, and I didn't appreciate that. There were a few other female characters. Again, they were vapid. They were not well developed, and I wanted to see a little bit more from what the ladies had to say, or at least a more equal representation of gender in the characters. Obviously, most of the characters in the story were white because this book is looking at this very upper echelon Vermont, very fancy liberal arts college. So that is going for this sort of higher socioeconomic status. And I think part of the idea here is they are a very homogenous group of kids. And so they are all white and wealthy and educated. So that does relate to the overall themes of the story, so it made sense that she made that choice there. Another thing I do have to mention is that I listened to this as an audiobook for part of my reading experience, and I did not like the audiobook narration. Donna Tartt narrates her own audiobook, which normally I love. I appreciate authors and hearing their voices and where they choose to add emphasis and how they make their words come to life. However, Donna Tartt has a very distracting accent, and I say this as a person who also probably has a very distracting accent. But there was also something like she was trying to do something with her voice that just didn't come out right, or I don't know what it was. I don't know if I'm being discriminatory against her for the way that she talks, but I can put up with a lot in audiobooks. I found the narration here very grating over the course of however many hours I listened to it. Even my fiance had to note, like, as he was walking by and overhearing parts of the book, he's like, why does she talk like that? So that was one thing. You can try to listen to a sample of it. If it's not grating to you, you may want to give that a try. But otherwise, there's very much content here that you can enjoy in the print form if that is more of your thing. I think those are my full thoughts on The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars overall, a B. It's not one of my favorite books of all time. It is, you know, some of the issues with the women in the story, and I didn't grade it down because of the audiobook, because that's sort of a separate grade. But it was an enjoyable reading experience. She did great character development for the male characters in the book because she had lots of space in which to do that. I thought the story was interesting, and I do think it is something that you will want to give a read if you get the chance, if you've got several hours of your life to devote to this hefty tome. If you've read The Secret History and you have thoughts you want to share that are spoiler free, you can feel free to do that down in the comments. And also, if you've read The Goldfinch, which is the one that I might be reading next, I wanted to read The Secret History first before reading this one, but I've been dying to read this since I got it. If you've read this one, let me know your thoughts on that in the comments too before I pick this one up for good. And as always, book nerds, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.